On today's show, is Charlie Elick the defensive defenseman teams are looking for? We'll talk about that on today's show on Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalakash, Director of North American Scouting for Dobber Prospects, with Sebastian Hyde, Director of European Scouting and Head Scout for Dobber Prospects. And on today's show, we'll be breaking down Charlie Elick's game in detail. Elick is a big right-handed defenseman who's been playing in the WHL this season. We'll break down his game in detail. We'll start with the puck skills in the first segment, passing, handling, shooting, as well as the skating and the physicality. That's in the first segment. In our second segment, we'll talk about the more intricate stuff, the puck, the toolkit habits, the decision making, all that good stuff. And in our final segment, we'll talk about the upside with Charlie Elick, which team would be the best fit, what his projection is, all that good stuff. Before we get into any of that, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day and leave us a rate and review. So let's get things started right away here with Charlie Elick. Talk me through the size, handedness, his team, how many points he put up, all that good stuff. I hear he's played some pretty good international hockey as well. Let's talk about all that.
For sure. So Charlie Elick is a 6'3", 198-pound right shot defenseman playing for the Brandon Wheat Kings in the WHL. And as you mentioned, he played a pretty big role for Team Canada at the U18 World Championships, logging 3 assists through 7 games, but playing a really, really reliable and defensively capable type of role, a real shutdown defenseman, especially against the rush. In the WHL, he played with a lot more chaos and a lot more aggression, taking more risks on the defensive side of things than he did in that tournament. Through those 65 games in the WHL this season, a fully healthy season, he scored 4 goals and 27 points. So just under half a point a game, didn't really pop off with massive numbers, but there's no real offensive defenseman in that Brandon system. They like their defensemen to play more conservative roles. No defenseman scored more than 36 points this season, which was Luke Shipley who did so. But Charlie Elick is a player who will be drafted likely in the first round due to his combination of impressive mobility and really, really good physicality and defensive impact. He's a really suffocating rush defender, and we'll get into what makes the habits so intriguing in the second segment. But let's actually turn the script a little bit here. We usually start off with the puck skills in this first segment, but I want to start off with a combination of physicality and skating, because that's what makes Charlie Elick so interesting and a real high, middling to high upside type of swing to take. I think there's a significant second pairing upside in this player. Think stylistically Braden Schneider type of player in terms of upside. And he's a fantastic skater. He's really mobile in all 4 directions. He's able to match footwork off the rush, and he's a very powerful stride. He can be caught flat-footed at times. I think the pivots are maybe one area where he could improve a little bit in his skating, especially in his defensive skating. But the physicality is one of the top ones in this entire draft class. He's big, he's strong, he's violent. He likes to throw the body, but he's also quite selective with his hits most of the time. There's some viewings where he likes to chase hits a little bit, but at least in my viewings over the course of the season, for the most part, he's very selective when he takes big risks to step up to stop a rush and really throw the body and go for that big hit. And when he does throw a big hit, he makes sure he finishes the play right there without letting a chance happen afterwards.
So I do want to go back to that mobility. You mentioned some pivots issues. I'm not as concerned with the pivots just because of how much ice he covers with his reach and his backward skating. He's a player who often keeps the play in front of him on defense. He's not a player who's going to pinch hard. When he does pinch, it's really because there's no one behind him to worry about, no one rushing in behind him, that kind of thing. He's a player who loves to keep the play in front of him, keep his decisions clear, and his reach, again, is just amazing, which means that when you try to blow past him, he's really good at just just kind of moving his knee, not necessarily pivoting his whole body, but just moving his knee in your direction, getting his stick out and one-handing it away. He's got a hard stick as well. He always gets sticks on shots when he's defending the rush. So if a player's walking in, he'll match his footwork backwards right as a player's about to shoot. He gets a stick right in there, deflects the puck upwards into the net. I see that often from Charlie Elick this year. And like you mentioned, the physicality is just ridiculous. This is a player who can stifle opponents really easily. He can, as soon as he pins you, you're not getting out of his reach. Like he's really strong, really powerful, and that manifests itself. I wouldn't say in like big crushing either along the boards or open ice hits. It manifests itself more in his ability to just suffocate you. He's like a weighted blanket. He just really is really good at just stifling anything that comes his way. It makes it really hard for opponents to set up. This is a player who doesn't struggle at all to kind of stop, to nip setups in the bud before they happen. I think is really the best quality for me with Charlie Elick. He doesn't let the opponents set up quickly. And when they do set up, he's often the one who's stopping the setup before it leads to a shot. So that ability, that end zone defending and that rush defending, for me is what stand out the most. But I do want to talk about the puck skills because there's still a couple things to talk about. The shot is heavy, definitely really, really heavy. Not the most accurate, not the most threatening from the point, but he can definitely blast it. And he's a player who likes to shoot low, who likes to shoot for rebounds, which means that he's not scoring a lot of goals, but he's contributing to a lot of goals in the offensive zone with a lot of, kind of like we mentioned with Leon Mugli, chaos creating shots. With Mugli, it's more placement. With Elick, it's more just raw power. That's what I like the most. I do want to hear you on the passing because I've personally liked the passing from Charlie Elick. What do you think about his passing ability?
So have I. I've liked the breakout passing specifically, especially when he keeps his puck touches pretty short. He finds good passing options very quickly. He also doesn't just go for the easiest option by default. He searches for those like decently, like maybe not high skill type of passes to make in the breakout, but those passes in between, like those maybe 20 to 25 feet passes at times. And I like his ability to find those really quickly, identify his options fast, and also able to make smart decisions anyway. I think the passing crumbles a little bit when he starts to rely on his puck handling in combination with it. I think the handling is certainly a far weaker tool compared to the passing, and he's not necessarily a playmaker either. Like in the offensive zone, he's a good passer. He can distribute the puck pretty well, but he's not going to create high danger scoring chances through his passing on a very regular basis. But I'm with you. I think the passing is overall a plus level tool, maybe a 5.5. Whereas the puck handling is probably closer to a 4 grade.
Yeah. He's not a handler for sure. This isn't a part of his game that he likes to explore. This isn't a part of his game that he's used to exploring. And I don't see it becoming anything, at least NHL, even NHL average. But I definitely see him being your meat and potatoes, straightforward, get the puck, pass it quickly, move up the ice, take a big shot, and defend a rush type of defenseman. That's really his mold. I don't think he's really going to slip out of that too much. I think you can build around the passing, though. It's good enough that I think that you can make him a really good breakout passer. The player who receives the D-to-D pass and passes it up the ice kind of reminds me of Ben Sherrod in that element. I've also liked Ben Sherrod's forward passing. He's often the guy receiving the D-to-D pass, especially when he played with David Savard in Montreal. He was often the guy receiving the pass from Savard and moving it up the ice with a big, accurate pass. I think that Charlie Elick could develop into that type of player with his passing ability. We'll get into what he becomes really more in the third segment. We'll get into the details of that. But just a quick word on that. I think that that's kind of the player I'd expect him to be on the breakout, and the type of thing you could build out of him. But again, don't expect him to deke past a layer of pressure. He doesn't do it. It's just not his game. But that's our first segment done. We'll get into our second segment where we talk about Charlie Elick's details. So we'll talk about the toolkit, the habits, and the decision making in just a sec. But just before, a quick word from our sponsors at Game Time. If you're looking to buy cheap tickets last minute to any event, Game Time is the best place to secure them. You can get tickets to anything, whether it's sports with hockey, NBA, the NBA finals are coming up, all that good stuff. Or if you're just looking to buy tickets to a comedy show, theater, whatever it is, Game Time has you covered, and they are obsessed with saving you money. The primary deal right now is last minute deals. You can save up to 60% off of your tickets by buying last minutes for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, all that good stuff. They've got flash deals, they've got zone deals, and my favorite is the game time guarantee. If you do your research and find a ticket for the same in the same section and row as what Game Time has to offer you for less than what they're charging you, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, it's really simple. You just create an account and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. So download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, so let's move on to the what I call the mental segment. So the toolkit, the habits, and the decision making with Charlie Elick, the big right-handed defenseman out of Brandon in the WHL. Let's start with the toolkit. Defensively, it's clear the skating and defensive game gel so well with Elick. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And like we said in the first segment, the only issue being the pivots and him covering that much ice makes it even more promising that Charlie Elick is going to make it work at the NHL level. With Elick, I mean, the way that he matches footwork defensively is ridiculous for a player of his size. He's always in front of the player. He's always keeping a tight gap with the puck carrier, and he's always ready if the player cuts back, if the player spins around and tries to go the other way. Elick takes one stride, closes that gap, puts his stick on the puck, puts his body through the player. Game over. It's really that easy with Charlie Elick. That's what makes him really impressive for me. I do want to hear you on some of his other kind of elements of his toolkit. So I already talked about how the handling kind of dictates his game. Talk me through that more in detail. This isn't a player who dekes at all, I would say. I don't think I've seen a single deke from Elick this year. What are your thoughts on how that kind of molds his game?
For sure. I think that it means that his game falls apart when he holds on to the puck for too long. When he's
Yeah.
pressured and he tries to rely on his puck handling to solve that problem or just to diffuse the pressure, it doesn't usually work even at the WHL level. In terms of the NHL projection, he's going to be a defenseman who keeps his puck touches very short, but has, as we mentioned, some upside as a passer despite quick puck touches. He finds his options quickly and he can hit them accurately without needing much time or space to do so. But when he holds on to the puck for overly long, the play just breaks down for him a little bit. That said, I do like the combination of his feet and his passing. I think he's able to pass very well in stride, in motion, which certainly helps alleviate that deficiency with the handling a little bit. And he has that reach and he has that mobility that he's able to create space for himself in ways other than handling the puck out of pressure. But yeah, he's never going to be a player that can trust his handling to create or even really diffuse pressure too well, which is something to keep note of. But the way he approaches the game already compensates a lot for that weakness. So I'm not really concerned with the NHL projection. He's not a player that's going to be an offensive defenseman or a transition ace in terms of being a puck carrier on the rush. He's going to be a breakout passer, and the puck touches he has in the neutral and offensive zone are going to be very short by nature and very much focused on connecting play between his teammates rather than creating play individually.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. And you mentioned kind of the breakout passing ability. I think that's really where the skating and passing gel the most. I talked also as well about Elick being the receiver on the D to D pass to play it up the ice. That's exactly why that's such a good thing for Charlie Elick. That's such a good element of his game, is that he's so good at turning at taking at turning lateral mobility into forward momentum. So when he's receiving a D pass, he's setting his feet up. He's using kind of lateral crossovers to get a stick ready for that pass. And as he receives a pass, he's so good at turning that sideways momentum into forward momentum, which makes him really good at either skating past a blue line, making an entry pass, or just bombing the puck up the ice. Which I mean, I love that part of his game. It's a very specific thing to be good at, but he does it so well that he's going to be able to make that work at the NHL level. I also want to talk about the habits with Elick. As I mentioned, really, really short gaps in transition. When he's defending the rush, he's not 10, 15 feet away from the player, waiting for them to do something so he can react. He's right in their face. He's right along with them, but he doesn't overcommit and get aggressive on the puck carrier. He doesn't try to close the gap right away. He keeps the gap short the whole time. And the moment the opponent does something, he reacts with the right thing. Like I mentioned, if they try to cut back on him, he'll close that gap with one stride, get a stick on the puck, get his body through the player, and the puck usually is so well disrupted that it leaves the offensive zone on its own on those cutbacks. Either that, or if the opponent tries to cut across him, he'll break and keep his stick in the lane, and he's really good at stopping his momentum and then using quick crossovers to keep up with the player as they're changing directions. Sometimes he gets caught, like, I've seen him in practice against Macklin Celebrini, for example, get torched, that kind of thing. But Macklin Celebrini's Macklin Celebrini. And I think Charlie Elick is going to learn with time that at the NHL level, especially against top sixes, you can't give them as much space on inside cuts as he does. But when it comes to cutbacks, when it comes to playing the boards, he manages that so well. On top of that, in terms of habits, this isn't a player I'd say scans a lot, which I think is something that he can improve his passing with even further. Because if he learns to scan before his pass reception, before his puck retrievals, he'll get even better at finding second or third options. He's already good at it as he stands. I'd say he's really good at finding the second option and really bad at finding the third one, which is the main issue. But as soon as he adds scanning to his arsenal, he's got enough awareness and processing speed in order to potentially be really good at finding that third option. I'm curious what you think, though, about his decision making, because there are times where I feel like Elick doesn't really see the immediate threats, especially defensively. He's really focused on what's in front of him, but he doesn't see, for example, the backdoor pass option or those kinds of things. What do you think about that, though?
I agree. I think again it comes down to scanning. I think that's an element of his game that I'm relatively hopeful will be able to get ironed out a decent amount by the time he makes the jump to the NHL, because you need to be able to scan at a high level, especially if you're going to be playing second pairing minutes, and that is the upside with this player. You can't be missing those backdoor options on a regular basis, and with Elick in poor viewings, those plays happen like 2, 3, 4 times in a game, and typically they don't happen, right? Like maybe once in an odd game, but when they happen regularly and it's a game where he's not fully focused and he's not really scanning for his options as actively as he could be, it falls apart pretty quickly, right? He can get a bit hyper fixated on what's in front of him, on the puck carrier himself. Not to say that he chases play and chases the puck too much, but he can get a little bit laser focused on it and miss the periphery a little bit.
Yeah, I think the other issue is where on the ice these issues happen. Because with Charlie Elick, a lot of the minutes he's going to spend are either going to be as a pressure diffuser at the offensive zone blue line, like he'll get a low to high pass, and his job's going to be to either delay or put it on net, that kind of thing, or he's defending the rush or defending in zone. So in those scenarios with Charlie Elick, you need to be scanning. So when there's a deficiency in his scanning, it doesn't just fall apart for him. It falls apart for Brandon overall because of how much emphasis is put on Elick in terms of defending a rush, in terms of being the defensive stalwart in his own zone. So when he's not scanning and he misses an option, he misses an assignment, it leads to pretty big breakdowns and pretty big chances against. And like I said, when he's a diffuser at the blue line and he doesn't scan before his puck touch, he can take maybe half an extra second, and by that time, the opponent's closed down on him, disrupts the puck, and it's a 2-on-1 or a breakaway against the other side. So scanning's definitely the objective for me with Charlie Elick. I wouldn't worry about the skating. I wouldn't worry about the defensive game. If you can work on the scanning, improve his puck skills, you've got a really good NHLer. But I'll get into that in just a second. That's our second segment done. Just before we get into the third, a quick word from our sponsors at Policy Genius. Life insurance is such an important safety net for you and your family, but it gets really difficult when you try to find the right life insurance policy for your loved ones, and that's where Policy Genius kicks in. Policy Genius is a great source in order to sift through the muddiness when it comes to different life insurance policies, and Policy Genius makes sure that you always get the right option for you and your family. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options are 100% online as well and help you avoid unnecessary medical exams. With Policy Genius, what's really good is that they have an award-winning team of agents, and their agents have no incentive to recommend one one insurer over the other, so you can trust their guidance, you can trust their advice, and know what you're paying for with your life insurance policy. If you get your life insurance policy through work, the bad thing with that is it doesn't follow you if you lose your job, if you quit, if you get fired. Your life insurance policy won't carry on with you. Though with Policy Genius, they make sure you get a life insurance policy that sticks. So get peace of mind by finding the right life insurance with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description below to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you can save. That's policygenius.com. Alrighty, so let's close things off with our analysis of Charlie Elick, the big right-handed defenseman for the Brandon Wheat Kings, in his third segment, with our projection of his game, what his upside could be, which team would be the best fit for him at the NHL draft, and which team is likely to pick him. We'll start off with a projection with Charlie Elick. Like I said, I think the main thing that Charlie Elick needs to work on is scanning and puck skills. If he can get that up to at least NHL average, I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about a bona fide number 3, number 4 defenseman here in Elick. Am I confident in his ability to improve his puck skills to a level that he's at least able to keep up offensively on a second pair? I don't know. But he's got the rush defense. He's got the end zone defending. He's got the physicality, the speed, the agility, the mobility from the blue line, that long reach. He's got such a solid base. Like, what do you think his floor is?
I think it's pretty high. I think if we're talking floor, like a stabilizing number 6, who you don't really want to have on puck very much at all, but who can make a good first pass and is a decent enough rush defender, who just mitigates chances overall, like the ultimate like play killer, and then playing like low to no event hockey when he's on the ice. I think that's kind of the floor with this play, and it's one of the tantalizing prospects of picking him in the first round, is that you're getting a valuable piece if you're a contending team, almost no matter what, like barring injury or like really, really tragic development. But the upside is also really intriguing. Getting the prospect of getting a second pairing defenseman with a mid to late first round pick, maybe even a high second round pick if he really drops, is really interesting. So I think there's a number of teams that would be like really, really like to tantalize to make that selection on drafting. I doubt he falls to day 2 of the draft, but is he maybe a player that we were too low on over the course of the season at Dobber Prospects, because he does have this really strong foundation, these strong tools, the strong rush defending, the high floor, and the decent upside?
I would say not that we were too low on him. It's just that I think at Dobber Prospects, there's value for us in fantasy that isn't really as accessible with Charlie Elick, right? Like, this is a prospect who I don't think will put up 30 points in the NHL. I'd be really surprised if he does. We're talking about a 15 to 20 point guy who won't even score that much. He'll get a lot of his points through rush plays where he's a secondary on a 2-on-1 maybe that he created. That's the most I could see out of Charlie Elick, is a really good 2-on-1 creator for his team. So he'll make the pass, he'll bomb the pass up the ice to the right option. Those two guys will skate it up and score. I think that's the likely kind of outcome in terms of points for Elick. I don't see him playing on a power play. I see him playing mainly as a top penalty killer. That has some value in multi-cat, but not to a point where I think he's got the value of a bona fide, true high-end first rounder. He is in our first round, or maybe I think he just missed out. I think he was 33rd.
One pick out. Yeah.
So we've gone a bit more confident. We were very low on him. We had him in the 40s and 50s earlier on because we saw nothing offensively and weren't as confident with his mobility. But the more we watched him, the more I watched him at least, and the more Luke watched him as well, our WHL scout, the more confident we got in the fact that this is an NHLer. I think teams will be a lot more high on him than we are, though. I wouldn't be surprised to see him picked in the early 20s at the highest. Maybe even a team in the late teens takes a pick on him. That kind of range wouldn't surprise me at all for Charlie Elick, especially since once you hit that range, we're talking about teams that are trying to contend, that are trying to build bona fide NHL playoffs future. And I think Charlie Elick is pretty much what teams look for when it comes to playoff contention. Big, mobile, defensively responsible, will play big minutes for you, will stifle opposing top ends. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being a pick in the early or late teens or early 20s. But yeah, just to kind of sum things up regarding why we had Elick a bit lower, I think it's really just that the value in fantasy isn't as high as other prospects that are ahead of him. And this is a pretty deep class in terms of potential options for NHL future. Even into the 50s, we had difficulty kind of separating guys and putting them in different tiers and all that. So it's a good draft. I think that's another part of it.
For sure. And if we then move on into potential team fits on draft day, I think there's a couple of really intriguing options. I think, as you mentioned, there's a chance he ends up going in that late teen range. And one team that stands out a little bit to me there, well, actually, I'll put two forward. One would be the Chicago Blackhawks at 18th overall. If they opt to go with Ivan Demidov or one of the forwards at second overall, and they still want to get a stabilizing defenseman with that 18th overall selection, I think Charlie Elick would be right up their alley if, for instance, Dion Solberg is no longer on the board. And then the next pick up, the Vegas Golden Knights. They like their pro-ready, refined, toolsy players who have a decent amount of trade value, who they have the option of flipping, but will also could become NHL contributors within 2 to 3 years after being drafted. And I think Elick is very much up that alley. But if we look a little bit further down, the Toronto Maple Leafs at 23rd overall. I'm convinced they're going with a big, toolsy, mobile, physical defenseman with that draft selection. Whether that ends up being Solberg or EJ Emery or Charlie Elick remains to be seen, but I think those would be some of the big contenders for that draft pick.
I fully agree. I think that that's kind of the more realistic option for Toronto. If I'd say that's a bit early for EJ Emery. I like him. I don't like him as high as 23rd. I don't think he's a first rounder, not a bona fide first rounder. So if they want to go with a defenseman that brings kind of the same elements as EJ Emery, but maybe to a lesser extent. To a lesser extent defensively and to a bit of a higher extent offensively, if they want a player that's a bit more in the gray area between a defensive and two-way defenseman, I think Charlie Elick is that guy. I think EJ Emery is a great defensive defenseman. He's the best rush defender in this draft for me personally. But in zone and on the breakout, Elick's better. I think he's a better option. Other teams, though, I mean, I'm thinking of teams that really need a shut down right-handed defenseman. Teams that are a bit kind of thinner on defense, a bit more stacked on offense. If we're talking,
Ottawa?
if by some, yeah, I mean, Ottawa's an option there. I'm thinking if he slips out of the first round by some miracle, which of the first 5 picks would you say in the second round would be the kind of the ideal option for Charlie Elick?
Chicago again. Like
Again,
if he's
right?
available at 34, I think they would love that. Like right now, what Chicago has in the pipeline at right shot defense, it's Sam Renzel,
That's it.
and I'm not sure what else there is. Right, like
Yeah,
it's pretty light. Like on the left side, of course, they have Korchinski, they have Vlasic, they have Ethan Del Mastro coming through pretty soon, which are
yeah.
all some pretty interesting NHL talents. But on the right side, it's pretty barren. And Elick would also bring a very different dimension to the game compared to a guy like Sam Renzel.
Absolutely. That's an interesting selection. But that wraps things up for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments below what you think of Charlie Elick, what you think his upside is, and whether or not you want your team to pick him. If you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rating review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports on YouTube's first 24/7 news channel. And make sure to tune in for our next shows as we continue our prospects coverage for the month of June. This has been Haddock Kalakash, Director of North American Scouting for Dobber Prospects, with Sebastian High, Director of European Scouting and Head Scout for Dobber Prospects, and we hope you tune in next time.